From consoles that doubled as sewing machines to ones that could only be bought from a vending machine, the gaming industry has seen some wild ideas. Companies are always trying to come up with the next big thing, but sometimes they swing for the fences and miss, striking out in a spectacular fashion. These failed consoles are like cautionary tales, reminding us that even the biggest names in gaming can make some truly baffling decisions. Today we're looking at the console concepts that were just too crazy to succeed, ideas that pushed the boundaries but never quite took off. Get ready to dive into the graveyard of forgotten consoles, where we'll unearth some of the most ambitious, bizarre, and downright awful gaming machines ever conceived. The Nintendo 64DD. This monstrosity was Nintendo's answer to the burgeoning world of CD-ROM gaming. Back in the late 90s, cartridges were starting to show their age. They were expensive to produce, had limited storage space, and couldn't handle the massive amounts of data that CD-ROMs could. So, Nintendo decided to release a bulky add-on for the N64 that would let you play games off these newfangled discs. They called it the 64DD, which stood for Disk Drive. The 64DD was supposed to revolutionize gaming with its rewritable magnetic discs. These discs offered a whopping 64 megabytes of storage space, which was mind-blowing at the time. But here's the thing, the 64DD was a colossal flop. It launched in Japan in 1999, a full 3 years after the N64 itself came out. By that time, the PlayStation had already taken the gaming world by storm with its sleek design, impressive CD-ROM library, and a price tag that didn't require you to sell your kidneys. The 64DD, on the other hand, was expensive, clunky, and had a pathetically small library of games. Most developers had already shifted their focus to the next generation of consoles, leaving the 64DDD to languish in obscurity. The 64DD was a commercial disaster, selling a measly 15,000 units. It's like Nintendo reached into the bargain bin of ideas, pulled out this dusty old relic and thought, yeah, this'll sell millions. The mid-90s were a weird time for the tech industry. The internet was still this mysterious new frontier, and companies were tripping over themselves trying to figure out how to make money off of it. Enter Apple, a company known for its sleek design and questionable decision-making skills. In 1996, they unleashed the Apple Pippin upon an unsuspecting world. Now, the Pippin wasn't just a console, it was a multimedia platform. Basically, Apple took a Macintosh computer, stripped it down to its bare essentials, and slapped a game controller on it. They figured people would be lining up to buy a device that could browse the web, play educational games, and make toast. The problem was the Pippin was caught in this weird limbo between being a computer and a gaming console. It wasn't powerful enough to be a serious computer, and it didn't have the game library to compete with the likes of the PlayStation or the Nintendo 64. Plus, it was expensive, retailing for a whopping $599. And the games. The Pippin's game library was about as diverse as a saltine cracker. There were a few educational titles, some ports of classic Mac games, and a handful of original titles that were about as exciting as watching paint dry. But hey, at least the Pippin had internet connectivity, right? Well, sort of. You needed a dial-up modem to get online, and even then the experience was slower than a snail in molasses. The Apple Pippin was a commercial disaster, selling a paltry 42,000 units. It's like Apple took a bite out of the poisoned apple of failure. The Pippin's failure taught us a valuable lesson. Just because you can slap a computer and a gaming console together doesn't mean you should. The Sega Nomad, a handheld console so ambitious it makes Icarus look like a cautious homebody. Released in 1995, the Nomad was essentially a portable Sega Genesis. That's right, you could take all the 16-bit goodness of the Genesis on the go. It was like having a portable arcade in your backpack. The Nomad was a technical marvel for its time. It had a 3.25-inch color screen, a built-in speaker, and could even connect to a TV for a full console experience. It was like the Swiss Army knife of handheld consoles, but like a Swiss Army knife, it tried to do too much and ended up being mediocre at everything. For starters, the Nomad was bulky. I mean, this thing was a brick. It was so big and heavy, it could have doubled as a workout weight. And speaking of weight, let's talk about the battery life. The Nomad guzzled 6 AA batteries like a thirsty camel, and even then, you'd be lucky to get more than 2 hours of playtime out of it. But the Nomad's biggest problem was its timing. It was released in 1995, the same year that Sega launched the Saturn. The Sega Nomad was a commercial flop, selling a mere 1 million units. It's a shame because the Nomad had the potential to be a game changer. Chapter 4: PlayStation. Vita, Sony's handheld hopeful, the PlayStation Vita. The Vita, Sony's attempt to recapture the handheld gaming market. They poured their heart and soul into this thing, cramming in more power than a Tesla running on rocket fuel. Released in 2011, the Vita was a technological marvel, boasting a beautiful OLED touchscreen, dual analog sticks, and graphics that would make the PS2 weep with envy. Sony was so confident in the Vita, they even gave it a ridiculous name. I mean, Vita, what does that even mean? It sounds like a brand of vitamins for gamers. Take your Vita every day for improved hand-eye coordination and reduced lag. But despite its impressive hardware and ridiculous name, the Vita went down in flames faster than a paper airplane in a hurricane. What went wrong? Well, let's see. For starters, the Vita was expensive. I mean, this thing cost more than a decent gaming PC. And don't even get me started on those proprietary memory cards. Sony was practically holding gamers hostage, forcing them to pay exorbitant prices for tiny slivers of storage space. But the Vita's biggest sin was its lack of games. Sure, there were a few decent titles here and there, but nothing that could truly rival the likes of Uncharted or God of War. And let's not forget the rise of mobile gaming. By the time the Vita rolled around, smartphones were already becoming ubiquitous. The PlayStation Vita was a commercial failure, selling a paltry 15 million units. It's a shame because the Vita was a fantastic piece of hardware. Chapter 5: N-Gage, Nokia's Sideways Saga. The year is 2003, flip phones are all the rage, Baby Got Back is topping the charts, and Nokia, the king of mobile phones, decides to dip their toes into the murky waters of handheld gaming. Thus, the N-Gage was born. Now, the N-Gage wasn't just a phone, it was a gaming phone. Basically, Nokia took a Nokia 3650, slapped a D-pad and some buttons on it, and called it a day. They figured people would be lining up to buy a device that could make calls, send text messages, and play Tomb Raider. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for starters, the N-Gage was hideous. It looked like someone had taken a taco, glued a phone to it, and then run it over with a steamroller. And speaking of tacos, let's talk about the N-Gage's infamous side-talking design. In order to make a call on this monstrosity, you had to hold the phone sideways, with the speaker and microphone awkwardly positioned on the side. It looked as ridiculous as it sounds, but the N-Gage's problems ran deeper than its questionable aesthetics. The game library was about as appealing as a dumpster fire. Sure, there were a few recognizable titles like Tomb Raider and Sonic the Hedgehog, but most of the games were poorly made and forgettable. And don't even get me started on the N-Gage's user interface. The Nokia N-Gage was a commercial disaster, selling a paltry 3 million units. It was too weird, too expensive, and too ahead of its time. Chapter 6: Virtual Boy, Nintendo's Crimson Curse, the Virtual Boy. Just saying the name sends shivers down my spine. This monstrosity, released by Nintendo in 1995, was their first foray into the world of virtual reality. And let me tell you, it was a disaster of epic proportions. The Virtual Boy was essentially a pair of binoculars glued to a tripod with a red and black screen that displayed 3D graphics. I say 3D in quotes because it wasn't true stereoscopic 3D. It was more like looking at two slightly offset images that were supposed to trick your brain into seeing depth. But here's the thing, the Virtual Boy was uncomfortable to use, like really uncomfortable. The headset was heavy and awkward, and the red and black graphics were headache-inducing. It's like Nintendo took all the worst aspects of gaming and crammed them into one horrible package. And the games. The Virtual Boy's game library was about as diverse as a bowl of plain oatmeal. Most of the games were simple tech demos that showcased the console's innovative 3D capabilities. But the Virtual Boy's biggest sin was its price. The Virtual Boy was a commercial disaster, selling a measly 770,000 units. It's like Nintendo reached into the toilet bowl of ideas, pulled out this steaming pile of garbage and thought, yeah, this'll sell millions. So there you have it, 6 consoles that crashed and burned harder than a meteor shower at a fireworks factory. These consoles serve as a reminder that even the biggest names in gaming can make some truly baffling decisions. From the awkward ergonomics of the Virtual Boy to the side-talking shenanigans of the N-Gage, these consoles are a testament to the fact that innovation doesn't always equal success. These consoles taught us valuable lessons about the importance of good design, affordable pricing, and a killer game library. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go play some Super Mario World on my Super Nintendo. At least I know that console won't give me a headache.